we say with historical certainty about the actions of Jesus of Nazareth? A summary has been given by Sanders of what we know with absolute certainty, what we know with some certainty, and then also the categories of what is probable or possible, but also a category of what has really been excluded, and we are talking about the way in which the history of Jesus is presented in the Gospels and the letters of the New Testament. And there is an important idea behind this, namely that theology should focus on history and not that theology should determine the image of history. That's usually what happens. It is faith that has usually guided historical research. What do we know for sure about Jesus' actions? Now that Jesus saw himself as the last messenger of God before the kingdom would dawn, we know for sure that he looked forward to a new order of life that would be created by a powerful act of God. The 12 tribes would be gathered together again in that new order. There would be a new temple. There would be no more need for violence. Divorce would not be necessary, but neither would it be allowed. And people on the margins of society would have a place, including sinners. Jesus and his disciples, referred to as the poor, the lowly, would play the leading role in that kingdom. We know that Jesus had followers who followed this expectation, and who were fully prepared to experience such a transformation of life, even after his death and after the stories of the resurrection. No doubt Jesus also had followers among the great crowds in Jerusalem and elsewhere. They were attracted by his healings, but also by his message. Because in his view the masses, the average Israelite, were given an important place in the kingdom. Some have seen him as a great figure from Israel's past. Some thought of Jeremiah. Others may have referred to him as the Son of God. Now all this is not unique at all. We can understand Jesus and his movement very well in a sociological way and a psychological way. In fact, nothing we know about Jesus is unique. Not his miracles, not the nonviolence, not the eschatological expectation, and not his reaching out to the people on the margins. He was also not unique in that he saw his own mission as crucially important, nor is it unique that he believed in God's grace. Now we can say that the combination of factors is unique, but that just means he was a real person. Perhaps his teaching was uniquely profound and creative. Certainly, the parables attributed to Jesus are a special form of literature. Only we have no comparison material. We know that Judas the Galilean was known as a teacher and that he also had followers, but history has not preserved what he taught or how he taught, and historical research has shown that we actually do not know for sure that Jesus' parables were actually told by him. It is certainly possible that parables could have been composed by his later followers. So Christianity begins as a renewal movement that cannot be called unique at all and that certainly falls within the boundaries of Judaism. We don't know a lot of things either. For example, we do not know whether and how Jesus gave himself a role in the kingdom that was to come. Jesus never actually claimed his kingship directly. Of course, the disciples have given him the title of Messiah or Christ, and that is tantamount to a claim to be leader, to be king in that kingdom. It is certainly true that others have thought that he was pretending to be the king of the Jews. But we actually find no indication that Jesus himself claimed that. He did claim to play a decisive role in the creation of that kingdom. What he claimed over himself was almost equivalent to claiming kingship. But we can't really find a direct claim. The only direct statement Jesus made about this is the symbolic gesture with which he enters Jerusalem riding on a donkey. But it is not certain whether that story is authentic. The historical information about Jesus makes it clear that his attitude towards the temple, towards the 12 disciples, the prohibition of divorce, and his dealings with sinners in Israel, all of that can be called authentic. Well, Something has happened between what we know of Jesus historically and the views that the disciples later built up around Jesus. Perhaps the most important thing is this: Jesus came to call sinners. That much is clear. He came to offer those sinners and others who were on the margins a place in the coming kingdom. But that element of Jesus' message was transformed by the disciples into the conviction that Jesus had died precisely to save those sinners from sin and to bring those sinners back to the right path. That straight path, that change of life, was a very important thing in the beginning of the church. Now, this appeal to sinners even means that Jesus expected their behavior to go beyond the normal requirements of Judaism. Is it possible that Jesus actually did that, asking for a higher righteousness from those who accepted him? Is it possible that he abandoned the normal way in which the Torah would bring about justice? Or is that just something that the later followers of Jesus eventually developed? Would it really be the case that Jesus would have taught that you no longer had to keep the Torah and that this especially applied to non-Jews who would then have nothing to do with the Torah at all? Or is that precisely an invention of Paul and that Paul is therefore historically the actual founder of the Christian community? And I must make the comment that research also shows that we cannot even say that so simply about Paul. Paul also does not actually give up the Torah, and so if we look at Paul in a historical way, we come into conflict with theology. But this is a very important point about the relationship between history and theology. History as we are now gradually getting to know it, including through the work of Sanders and James Dunn and others, means that we will also have to build a different theology. The texts of the New Testament clearly take on a different scope and meaning. However, so far theology has not been able to adapt in any way to these new insights into the real history in which Jesus stands. In summary, we can say that the literature of the New Testament is propagandistic literature guided by a theological system that gradually developed after the death and resurrection of Jesus. Current theology will have to process those different layers in the history surrounding Jesus and the first disciples in order to arrive at a different, renewed theology instead of doing what is now customary based on the theology of the Reformation or from the tradition of the Roman Catholic Church or 19th century liberal Protestant views to determine the historical image of Jesus. Then you put the cart before the horse because then you dictate what history should be from a theologically biased perspective. Let's see if a theology is possible, I would say, that fits in with what we really know historically. And one of those great sources for that insight is Sanders' book Jesus and Judaism, from which I have now reproduced a small excerpt.